Welcome back to America's Commercial Real Estate Show. I'm Michael Bull. Have you checked out realcrowd.com? This is an interesting site. You can invest small amounts of money in large, nice commercial real estate projects with experienced sponsor. Visit realcrowd.com. And speaking of sponsors, we're talking about zoning today, zoning for fun and profit. Please welcome my next guest is Patrick Foxy, CEO of Saint Consulting Company. Now, they're headquartered in Boston. They have offices around the country, and they've worked on 2,000 zoning projects in 48 U.S. states and 5 countries. He's joining us on Skype. Patrick, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Patrick, I want to talk about some of the funny things that you've heard said, because I think it's crazy, some of the things that you've heard, that I've heard in zoning-related meetings. But before we get there, what would be your number one tip for a seller of a property where the buyer or developer is doing a rezoning?
Well, sure. It's about political due diligence.
Political due diligence.
Yes. There's all kinds of due diligence that we do when anybody looks at properties, and we work in just about every industry there is out there. All of the due diligence that you do, too many companies neglect to do political due diligence. You find out after you're way too far into the project that the Speaker of the House's mother lives across the street, or the local board was elected on a no-growth platform, and there's no way you're going to get anything done there. So doing that political due diligence, looking at major issues over the last year, who else has gotten permits and why, looking at what is the potential for rezoning there.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So what's your number one tip for a buyer or developer who's going to be involved in a rezoning project?
Yeah, they've got to do that due diligence as well. And it's also good to remember that, just because the rules say one thing, it doesn't mean we can't change the rules, right? There are lots of places where we can change the zoning. We can move a property to its highest and best use, generate far greater profitability from it. But it requires knowing what you're doing, going in ahead of time, being aware of the local situation on the ground, making sure you have the right people there. There are local political fixers in all of these communities that work on this stuff. Remember as well that those local political fixers, their relationships with the local politicians are much more important than their relationship with you.
Right.
So they can get you access, they can help get you in and move you along. But if it comes down to a real fight, they're on the side of the planning board or the city council. They're not on your side.
Right. Well,
so,
a good point. Good point, and I like your point that this can be very profitable when you talk about rezoning for properties for a higher and better use. And if there's those gray areas, we can get things done. Sometimes you can create some great value, great tips. Know what you're doing going in. Look at the political climate and get a good understanding of that. Now, also our show's called Zoning for Fun and Profit, and sometimes it's not so fun, but you have heard some funny things when you've been involved in some of these zoning meetings, haven't you?
Sure have. The difference between we work to get our clients' projects permitted and approved. We are also hired quite often to stop our clients' competitors from getting their projects approved. So we see this from both sides. And there's a major difference between being on the team trying to get your project approved, where you are judged on how you follow through, telling the truth, making sure that you're credible. Opponents can walk in and say anything.
Right.
Your traffic numbers had better bear out. You better be able to back them up. An opponent can walk in and say it's going to generate 75,000 cars. And why do you think that? Well, my brother-in-law said it. They don't have to back it up. And if you can prove them wrong, they shrug their shoulders, walk away, and the next guy comes up and says, I hear it's 50,000 cars and it's going to attract rats. They can just keep doing this.
Yeah.
So developers have to understand how to deal with the outrageous and the absurd. And we sure hear plenty of that, whether it's a solar farm where we had a woman stand up at a hearing and say, you can't build this. How many of these do you think you can build before you've sucked all the energy out of the sun? Now, we could try to bring Neil deGrasse Tyson to these meetings to try to do basic physics and science for these people, but it's awfully tough to teach some of these people some of that stuff. Wind farms. We had someone stand up and say, you're proposing 100 wind turbines pointing in one direction. If you're going to do this, you got to build 100 pointing in the opposite direction somewhere else on the planet, or you're going to screw up the rotation of the Earth.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so, how do you react to that? Do you just bust out laughing, or does it just? What do you do?
Well, a little chuckle is okay. Usually, the board has seen these people before.
Yeah.
They know what they're dealing with. These are often gadflies that are showing up at all of these hearings. But be careful not to be insulting. You might not want to address an issue like that is so absurd directly. Just let it move on, and that's usually what the board will do too. Yeah. Thanks for your input. Next.
Yeah, there's a lot of Nimbyism, right? Not in my backyard, so sometimes you're going to hear some funny things.
Sure. Like the guy who said, you can't build this steakhouse in my neighborhood because you're going to make all the dogs go crazy.
Not make all the dogs go crazy because you're building a steakhouse. Well, Patrick, great stuff, great tips, funny things you've heard. It's amazing. Thanks for joining us today.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us out there across the country, around the world. However you're watching or listening, we appreciate you being with us. And be sure and join us next week. We'll have another great show for you. And until next week, be sure that you always lead, learn, and laugh. And join us for America's Commercial Real Estate Show.